Now, on a totally different matter, obviously and unfortunately, this turmoil is not the only great challenge before us. Lest we forget, the healthcare fight against the worst viral pandemic in a century is still upon us. Our nation is trying to smartly and safely reopen. Just as small businesses in some cities are sweeping up broken glass, American workers and entrepreneurs across the nation are trying to rebuild the shattered prosperity our nation was experiencing just a few months ago. And meanwhile, beyond our shores, our enemies and adversaries would be only too eager to catch the United States with our guard down. So there's plenty of work before the Senate, and unlike the Democratic House of Representatives, which I understand may next appear here in Washington in about a month, the Senate is present and working. We're continuing to conduct oversight of our historic rescue package, the CARES Act, as it continues taking effect. I expect we will soon consider further bipartisan legislation to help the Paycheck Protection Program, the signature policy from Senators Rubio and Collins that has kept tens of millions of Americans employed, continue to work for our country. As we pivot toward reopening, the Senate is also working on significant COVID-related legal protections so our nation's schools, healthcare workers, and employers are not swamped with frivolous lawsuits and taxpayer dollars do not just stimulate the pockets of trial lawyers. At the same time, critical vacancies remain throughout the federal government and qualified nominees stand ready to fill them. So the Senate will work through 2 nominees to the federal district courts and a number of important executive branch positions, including Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy, Plans, and Capabilities, Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, and the new Special Inspector General for Pandemic Recovery. What's more, Madam President, we also have all the important legislation that needed to get done before the pandemic arrived in the first place. This month, we'll turn to bipartisan legislation led by Senators Gardner and Daines to provide stable support for the Land and Water Conservation Fund and lasting stewardship of our natural resources. Their bill will safeguard our nation's public lands for recreation and conservation and help generations of Americans continue to access and enjoy these treasures. And in the coming weeks, our colleagues on the Armed Services Committee will begin marking up the 60th consecutive annual National Defense Authorization Act. I know our colleagues need no reminder of how important that task is, neither do our men and women in uniform. The COVID-19 crisis makes it more urgent, not less urgent, that we continue to authorize investments in our service members, in their families, and in advancing and accelerating our national defense strategy. From honing our competitive edge against would-be rivals on land and sea to expanding our reach in the air and space, achieving our nation's strategic priorities begins right here this month with the NDAA. So, Madam President, Congress' to-do list is clear, and the Senate is manning its essential post, working to get the American people's business done.